Hey y'all, so what do you put in a grant proposal? We're going to talk about it today. Let's get into it. Hey y'all, this is Tiffany with Boss on a Budget. I help new and small nonprofits get up and running. If you need help with your nonprofit, be sure to subscribe to my channel because I drop a video every single week. If you need help getting started with grant writing or starting your nonprofit, I have a bunch of free and low-cost resources, so check out the description box below. So today we're going to talk about what do you put in a grant proposal? How do you know what to put in a proposal when you're staring at a blank screen and there's no direction from the funder? So before we get too deep into it, I do want to say that in a lot of circumstances, funders will tell you exactly what they're looking for. So they will have a list of items that they want you to reply to. They may have an application, and there may be like a full RFP. So that means request for proposals, where they have like sections and headers of where they want you to fill in. They have paperwork they want you to fill out. So it just depends on the funder. I don't want you to use this video as like your skeleton for every single proposal. No, if a funder is telling you what they're looking for and they're asking for specific sections or giving you specific questions, answer those questions, okay? Because you're going to be looking a little off sending something that they didn't ask for. This video in particular is for those times when you find a funder, they just tell you to send in a proposal. Sometimes you get that. Sometimes you meet people and they'll be like, oh, just send us a proposal. Tell us what you got. And so you may be feeling like, what am I supposed to write if they didn't tell me what they're asking for? So I'm going to give you some of the basic sections you should have in any proposal that you submit when there's no guidance available. So I do want to say I did do a video previously. I'm going to link it. You should see the card below where I talk about the main components of a grant proposal. I want you to know that just about every grant proposal has the same key elements, and it's no different with this video today. It's just going to be framed a different way or have different headers or different names for the different sections. But just know that every proposal essentially has the same elements. But again, this is what you can do when there's nothing to go off of, okay? So the first section that you should have is a summary of the request. So this should be like a 1-paragraph blurb on what you're asking for. So how much you're asking for, what you plan to do with the money, how you're going to use the money, what are the specific activities, all of that. What's the outcome of the work that you're trying to do? And it's just 1 paragraph. It doesn't have to be incredibly detailed, but it's basically a summary of everything that you would talk about in the proposal. It's basically like your roll-up paragraph that just describes everything that is detailed in the proposal. I recommend that people kind of tweak this last. They go over this as the last thing that they do. There's nothing wrong with writing it first to kind of give you some direction of what you want to talk about, but always go back to it because you'll find when you write proposals, things change and shift all the time. Numbers change, all of that, trying to make it work. So make sure that's the last thing you look at before you submit, okay? So the next section is going to be your organization section. This is talking about who you are as an organization, what your mission is, what your organizational goals are, who your key partners are, and what are some of your recent accomplishments as an organization. A lot of people think they need to go in on this section, but you don't. You just need 1-2 paragraphs tops. They just need to be able to know who you are, who you serve, what do you do, like what is your organization. So you know how like when you go on job interviews and you get that dreaded question, tell me about yourself, and you don't know what to say? It's the same kind of thing. It's just basically tell us about your organization. What do you think we should know? But just keep this brief. Don't go all detailed with this and just go over the things that I just talked about, right? So your mission, your organizational goals, what are your key partners or who are your key partners, and some recent accomplishments. Okay, so this next section is the most important section, at least one of the most important sections. It's typically called the need or the problem statement, and it basically answers the question, why is this program needed? What is going on that you need money to solve this problem, right? So here's where you're going to detail what the issue is, who's impacted by the issue, what they look like. This is where you're going to pull in data, you're going to pull in stories or quotes from people who've experienced this issue, who are struggling with this issue. You're going to talk about why this is an urgent need. You're going to make this compelling. This is the heart of your proposal. People need to know why you need money. And it's not because your organization needs money or your organization is worthy. That's not a good enough excuse or good enough reason for someone to give you money. It's more so about who are you helping? Why is that important? Why now? So you're going to have to really use this section to really dig deep and talk about like why is something needed? Why is a solution needed? Just keep in mind though, if you're saying why is a solution needed, you should be the solution. You need to tie these two sections together. So right after this, you're going to talk about what you're going to do with the money, what your project activities are. So you need to break down why your issue is important and why it's so urgent now. So as an example, say that you are an organization tackling affordable housing. You want to provide affordable housing for people in your community. Well, your issue isn't necessarily affordable housing. That's really not the need. The need really is home ownership, right? The issue is people don't have access to own their own homes because why? Because credit issues, it could be that there's a lack of, like you said, lack of affordable housing, lack of equity in how people are approved for loans. There are so many reasons why people can't afford homes in their community, right? And I will bring up the fact that there are particular communities that often are shut out from home ownership, like Black communities, right? There's a lot of redlining, there's a lot of discriminatory practices going on. So I would dig deep into why. Why is affordable housing even necessary? Why is that an issue, right? Because there are barriers to home ownership for people in your community. And so, again, when you start talking about your project activities, you're going to connect what you're doing to those issues. So you're going to want to talk about how you're addressing the lack of affordable homes on the market. You're going to talk about how certain people have poor credit, right? You're going to talk about those redlining procedures and what you're going to do to address that. If you're going to bring it up as an issue, you better make sure you're addressing it in the project activity section. So let's go on ahead and talk about the project activity section. This is another important part of the proposal. You should talk about how you're going to spend the money. They want to know, what are you doing with this money? And they need to know that whatever activities you're doing kind of coincides with how much you're asking for. So that's very important when you get to the budget, which is what I'll talk about a little bit later. So you need to outline what you're doing, when you're doing it, who's doing it, okay? So you need to be as detailed as possible. It's good to put this and organize this section in goals, right? So our goal is to, identify 5 or build 5 affordable houses in our community. Our goal is to conduct 1,000 classes. I'm just making this up off the top of my head, okay? But maybe conduct classes for 1,000 people. That makes more sense, Tiffany. Conduct credit building classes for 1,000 people, right? Another piece is work with community banks to ensure that there's equitable access to loans for all of your community. So partner in particular with community banks so that there's no redlining practices or so there are no discriminatory practices, right? So you may want to say, we've lined up partnerships with 5 community banks who will work with our clients, and we're serving 100 clients this year. So you see that I'm using a lot of numbers. So it's important to quantify the work that you're doing and be concrete. And as much as you can, give timelines around the work that you're doing. It's really good to organize this section under goals. And then those goals that I just talked about, under that, write what the activities are. So if you're going to build 5 affordable homes, we're partnering with builders, this builder in our community. We're going to start and break ground in August of 2021 and all of that. So you're going to go into detail about what you're doing as a part of the project. And again, I selected those 3 goals because they relate to why we said there's an issue around affordable housing in the community, okay? So you may be wondering, okay, Tiffany, you talked about the need, you talked about project activities. How long do they need to be? And honestly, I'm not going to give you a number. I know you're mad at me right now, but it's how long it needs to be. Just make the point, be straightforward about it. Don't put a lot of fluff and just get to it, right? So I would say maybe like at least 2 pages for these sections. You probably need more, um, but at least 2 pages for the need and the project activity section, because they are the meat of your proposal, depending on how long your overall proposal is. So if it's like a 5-page proposal, I definitely would say at least half of the proposal needs to be around the need and your project activities. So I hope that helps a little bit. You also want to talk about like the impact, like what would happen as a result of you doing this work. What is the positive impact on the people that you're serving? What's the positive impact on the community? And you can also do that by showing what your outcomes are. So you may be measuring the success of your organization by how many people own their own homes in a year, or how many people increase their credit scores, or how many loans are provided by the banks that you're partnering with. It's all in a way to kind of present your organization in a way that says we have been successful. So if you invest in us, it will be a good return on your investment. All right, so let's talk about the budget. So your budget is often the first thing that a reviewer will look at, and they also want to see that your budget matches up with what you said you're going to do, and it makes sense for what you're trying to do. So if you're asking for like a crazy number, like $200,000, but you're trying to like provide school backpacks for like 100 kids, that doesn't make sense. I know that's an extreme example, but I hope you get my drift, that you just need to make sure that you're not being just you're not doing too much, because people can see right through that, and people are looking at the words and seeing that they line up with the lines in your budget. So make sure they align. So in your budget, typically this is not like a normal organizational budget where they're going to ask you for revenue and expenses. Most times in proposals, they just want to see project expenses. That's what they're talking about when they're asking for a budget. They just want to see how much does it cost to do the activities you said you want to do for this project. So you're going to have a line item budget that details all of the activities, that follows the line of activities that you're trying to do. And you're going to have a section that is like a description which breaks down what you're trying to do. So for example, if part of it is staffing cost and you have 2 staff people, say that they make like $34 an hour, and they're going to spend 200 hours during the year or during a certain time period. You need to make sure that you write that out. 200 hours for 2 staff, $34 an hour, in the notes section of your budget, or sometimes it's called the budget justification. And you need to make sure that number adds up to what you have in your staffing. So you're basically going to do a line item budget for all of the expenses of what it costs or what it takes to do your project based on the activities you put in your proposal. All right, so the next section is about sustainability. It's how are you going to sustain this program once we give you this money? So that means I don't want to be, and I'm talking as the funder, I don't want to be the only reason why you stay afloat. You can't keep coming back to me asking me to keep you alive. You have to be looking at other sources of money to do this program and to keep it going. The last thing a funder wants to know is that they're doing something, especially if they're like launching a program or helping to launch a program, and there's no plan to continue the program once the money runs out. That's basically them like throwing their money down the toilet. They're looking for ways to leverage their money. They're looking to see if you're using other funding sources. Maybe you're using government funding. Maybe you're using donations or other funders or other foundations to kind of leverage and pool together their money so that it can have an even greater impact. A lot of people think, well, if a funder sees that I'm getting money from somewhere else, they're not going to give me money. That's not how they look at it. They look at it more so, we're trying to maximize our impact, because they got to give regardless. So they're going to give if they feel like it's worth it. But they're not going to give if they feel like once I do that, it's like I never did anything in the first place, because the program is going to be shut down. So just keep that in mind, that you want to show and have a paragraph that shows how are you using other funding sources to help supplement the funding that you would get from them. And this could be money. It can also be in-kind support. So tangible items, non-cash things that can help supplement the money that you will be getting from this funder. So the only other piece to a proposal, especially if you don't have any kind of guidelines for how to submit, is your 501c3 letter. Typically in most proposals, you're going to have to provide some supporting information like financial statements, your 501c3 letter, maybe your articles of incorporation. There are some things that they're going to ask for, but if they're not asking for anything, I would at minimum put my 501c3 letter with the application so they can see that you have that tax exempt status. You may be wondering, okay, so since there are no guidelines, how long should it be? I would say no more than 5 pages. The thing is this, if they don't have any guidelines or rules about how they want to accept proposals, then they probably are not very strict in how they do things. So they're not going to want a lot of things too formal, right? So when you're applying to the federal government, it's very strict, it's very formal. They know exactly what they want from you, and you better do it as they ask you to, because if you don't, you risk getting shut out. But for someone just like, well, just send us what you have, it's not going to be something where you have to be stuffy, it has to be a cover page, and it has to look like this, and it has to have this font. Just be professional in how you present. Use Times New Roman font, something very easy to read. I would try for like 11 size font, and I would do no more than 5 pages. Honestly, I would try for 2 to 3, but no more than 5 pages. It does depend on the complexity of your project. And if you're not sure and you're nervous about it, ask them. Ask them, is it okay to send in 5 pages? What's the max that they want to see? Probably they don't want to see a lot. I'm just going to be honest if they don't have any guidelines. So it really does depend on the funder, and just try to read the funder, but don't go too much on the deep end because people don't want to have to read a lot to get to the meat of what you're asking for. I hope that helped. If you guys need any more help, like I said, I have a bunch of free and low-cost resources to help you learn how to write a grant. Check out my grant writing workbook that helps outline every single section of a grant proposal for you. If you need help, visit me at www.bossonabudget.com, and I will see you next time.